Marcus stepped into Gate 32, clutching his boarding pass tightly. The terminal buzzed with the usual chaos, rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and muffled announcements over the intercom. He tried to blend in, keeping his head down as he made his way toward the gate. But then it happened. "Well, well," a voice drawled behind him, dripping with mockery. "Economy must have been rough this morning." Marcus froze for a split second before turning around. A middle-aged white man in an expensive tailored suit stood there, smirking at him. His gaze swept over Marcus's simple polo shirt and worn sneakers, like they were evidence of some moral failing. Nearby, passengers snickered, their laughter sharp and cutting. "Excuse me?" Marcus said, his voice steady despite the heat rising. To his cheeks, the man shrugged, feigning innocence. "Just saying you look like someone who's had a rough go of it. Maybe next time, spring for first class. You know, avoid all this." He gestured vaguely at the crowded terminal. Marcus clenched his jaw but didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, walking faster now, trying to put distance between himself and the man's condescending tone. But the words lingered, echoing in his mind. Avoid all this. What did that even mean? That people like him didn't belong here? That he was somehow less deserving? As he boarded the plane, he could feel eyes on him again. Passengers glanced up from their phones or magazines, watching him walk down the narrow aisle. Each stare felt heavier than the last. A silent judgment passed, without knowing anything about him. By the time he reached his seat, 14C, he was already exhausted. The businessman from earlier sat beside him, sipping champagne like it was water. He leaned back in his seat, completely relaxed, while Marcus struggled to fit his carry-on into the cramped overhead compartment. "You know," the man said after a moment, his voice casual but laced with disdain, "people like you really should consider upgrading. It's worth it, trust me." Marcus turned slowly, meeting the man's gaze. "People like me?" The businessman smirked. "You know what I mean." Anger flared inside Marcus, hot and sharp, but he swallowed it down. Arguing wouldn't change anything. Still, the comment gnawed at him, replaying in his mind like a broken record. "People like me." Before he could dwell on it further, the plane jolted violently. Turbulence rocked the cabin, sending drinks flying and passengers gripping their armrests. Marcus gripped his own tightly, knuckles whitening. The turbulence seemed to mirror the storm brewing inside him. Anger, frustration, humiliation, all swirling together until he wasn't sure which emotion was stronger. When the shaking finally subsided, an announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had to reassign some passenger seating arrangements due to unforeseen circumstances." Moments later, a gate agent approached Marcus. She avoided eye contact as she spoke. "Sir, there's been a mix-up. Your reservation seems invalid. We'll need to move you to standby." Marcus stared at her, disbelief washing over it. "Invalid? I booked this week ago." "I'm sorry," she said curtly, her tone dismissive. "There's nothing we can do." The businessman chuckled softly beside him. "Guess you really should have upgraded." Marcus wanted to scream, wanted to demand answers, to make them see how wrong this was. But instead, he took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This wasn't just about him. It was bigger than that. Every glance, every comment, every dismissive word was part of a system designed to make people like him feel small. And that realization ignited something inside him. As he stood there, surrounded by indifferent faces, Marcus realized this wasn't just about one flight or one rude businessman. It was about challenging a system that saw him as less than human, and maybe, just maybe, he had the power to do something about it. But first, he needed to figure out exactly who he was dealing with and how far he was willing to go to fight back. Marcus's frustration boiled over as the truth sank in. His ticket wasn't invalid. It had been deliberately flagged. The gate agent's dismissive tone confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't a mistake. It was systemic bias, plain and simple. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly despite his effort to stay composed. "I booked this flight weeks ago. There's no way it's invalid." The gate agent fidgeted with her clipboard, avoiding eye contact. "Sir, I'm just following protocol. Your reservation doesn't match our records." "Protocol?" Marcus repeated, incredulous. "What kind of protocol targets people like me?" Before she could respond, the businessman leaned forward, smirking. "Oh, come on, stop playing the victim. If you'd planned better, none of this would have happened." Marcus turned sharply toward him. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about planning. It's about being treated fairly." The businessman shrugged, unaffected. "Fairness doesn't exist in economy class, buddy. Maybe next time try harder." Passengers nearby began whispering among themselves. Some looked sympathetic, nodding quietly, as if they understood Marcus's plight. Others rolled their eyes or smirked along with the businessman, clearly siding with him. But then something shifted. Phones started coming out. Passengers began recording the confrontation, holding up their devices like judges in a courtroom. Every word Marcus spoke and every insult from the businessman was being captured for the world to see. "You're really going to stand there and act like this is normal?" Marcus demanded, addressing both the gate agent and the growing crowd. "Like it's okay to treat someone differently because of how they look?" The gate agent flushed, but didn't answer. Instead, she glanced nervously at her supervisor, who was now approaching cautiously. Marcus clenched his fists under the armrests. He felt powerless, cornered by a system designed to exclude him. But even as anger surged through him, another emotion surfaced: determination. Mid-flight, Marcus excused himself to the restroom, pulling out his phone. He dialed his assistant, his voice low but urgent. "Get me everything on Sky Air Airlines," he instructed. "Every scandal, every lawsuit, every board member, and find out if they're using racial profiling algorithms in their customer service protocols." His assistant hesitated. "Are you sure, Mr. Johnson?" "I'm positive," Marcus replied firmly. "If they think they can get away with this, they're wrong." Back home, the story exploded online. Social media lit up with outrage as hashtags. Like Tiki Justice for Marcus and Tiki End Systemic Racism trended worldwide. People shared stories of their own experiences with discrimination in the airline industry, turning Marcus's personal struggle into a global movement. Meanwhile, the businessman remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Throughout the flight, he continued mocking Marcus, making snide comments about his clothes, his seat choice, even his demeanor. Each insult fueled Marcus's resolve, though he kept his composure, biding his time. It wasn't until later that the businessman realized who Marcus truly was. As the plane descended, Marcus casually mentioned his name during a conversation with the flight attendant. "Marcus Johnson," he said smoothly, "founder of Novatech." The businessman's face paled. Panic flickered in his eyes as realization dawned. "Wait, you're that Marcus Johnson?" Marcus smiled faintly, a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Yes, I am," the businessman stammered, suddenly desperate. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "No," Marcus interrupted, his tone icy. "We didn't. You made your opinions clear, and now everyone will know exactly who you are and what this airline stands for." Armed with evidence of Sky Air's discriminatory practices, Marcus began plotting his next move. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with. And Sky Air Airlines was about to learn that the hard way. As the plane landed with a jolt, passengers scrambled to gather their belongings and exit the tension-filled cabin. But Marcus stayed seated, his calm demeanor belying the storm brewing inside him. He watched silently as the crowd thinned, his eyes fixed on the smug businessman lingering near the front of the plane. When the last passenger had disembarked, Marcus rose slowly, his movements deliberate. The flight crew exchanged uneasy glances. As he approached them, "I have a proposal," Marcus said, his voice steady but commanding. Confusion rippled across their faces. "What kind of proposal?" one of the attendants asked hesitantly. Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile. "Upgrade every single economy-class passenger to first class, for free. Effective immediately." Gasps filled the small space. The flight crew stared at him, stunned. "Sir, that's not possible," another attendant stammered. "It is now," Marcus replied coolly. Then his gaze hardened as it landed on the businessman. "But there's one condition. Mr. Thompson will not be included." The businessman, Thompson, paled. "What are you talking about?" he spluttered, stepping forward. "You can't do this!" "Oh, come now," Marcus said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Surely you recognize me, Marcus Johnson, founder of Novatech? Ringing any bells?" Recognition dawned on Thompson's face, followed swiftly by panic. "Wait, no, this isn't fair," he protested, his voice rising in desperation. Marcus leaned in slightly, his expression icy. "Fair? You've spent this entire flight mocking me, belittling me, treating me like I'm less than human. And now you want to talk about fairness?" Passengers, who had lingered nearby, erupted into cheers, clapping and shouting their approval. Cameras flashed as reporters who had been tipped off swarmed the scene, capturing every moment. Thompson stood frozen, his face flushed with shame as whispers of racist and bigot spread through the crowd. "Consider this my way of saying thank you to those who deserve it," Marcus continued, addressing the flight crew and the remaining passengers. "As for Mr. Thompson," he paused, letting his words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "Let's just say karma's overdue." Amid the chaos, Marcus felt a flicker of doubt creep into his mind. Was this enough? Humiliating Thompson was satisfying. Yes, but would it truly change anything? The systemic racism that had allowed this situation to happen in the first place, that was the real enemy. Thompson slunk away, shoulders hunched, as the weight of his actions, and Marcus's response crushed him. Around them, passengers celebrated Marcus's bold move, many shaking his hand or thanking him profusely. Reporters fired questions at him, their voices overlapping in excitement. But Marcus didn't linger. As the applause died down and the reporters pressed closer, he turned and walked away, leaving behind not just Thompson, but also the toxic system that had tried to demean him. With each step, he felt a mix of triumph and unease. Justice had been served, but the fight was far from over. As he strode through the terminal, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just walking away from this flight. He was walking toward a future where no one else would have to endure what he had. In the days following the flight, Marcus became a household name. News outlets hailed him as a hero, replaying footage of his confrontation with Thompson and his bold declaration to upgrade economy-class passengers. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #Justice for Marcus and #End Systemic Racism, amplifying stories of discrimination from people around the world. Protesters gathered outside Sky Air headquarters, holding signs that read "Equality Now" and chanting for accountability. But Marcus knew headlines weren't enough. Sitting in his Manhattan penthouse, overlooking the city skyline, he reflected on the fleeting nature of fame. "This isn't about me," he muttered to himself, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." With that thought, Marcus began drafting an initiative, a sweeping plan to dismantle discriminatory practices not just in airlines but across industries worldwide. He envisioned diversity training programs, partnerships with minority-owned businesses, and transparent accountability measures. It wasn't enough to expose injustice. He had to eradicate it. Sky Air executives soon reached out, desperate to salvage their reputation. They offered settlements, public apologies, anything to avoid bankruptcy. During a tense negotiation meeting, one executive pleaded, "Mr. Johnson, please tell us what you want." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "This isn't about money," he said finally. "If you want my investment, prove to me and the world that you're committed to equality. Show me real change." The room fell silent. The executives exchanged uneasy glances before nodding. Reluctantly, over the next several months, Sky Air implemented sweeping reforms. Diversity training became mandatory for all employees. Minority-owned businesses received funding and support. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild within marginalized communities. Meanwhile, Thompson's life unraveled. Exposed as a bigot and ousted from his company, he faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale about unchecked privilege. Friends distanced themselves, colleagues shunned him, and his once lavish lifestyle crumbled under the weight of public disdain. Marcus watched silently as the world transformed around him, yet one final moment awaited, an unexpected twist that would redefine his understanding of heroism. At a gala celebrating his efforts, a young black boy approached him shyly, clutching a piece of paper. "Thank you," the boy whispered, handing Marcus a drawing. In it, a superhero stood triumphantly atop a burning plane, saving passengers trapped inside. Beneath the image, scrawled in careful handwriting, were the words, "You're my hero." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as he looked at the boy. For the first time, he understood the true impact of his actions, not as revenge against Thompson or even reform within Sky Air, but as inspiration for future generations. The boy's wide-eyed admiration reminded him why he'd fought so hard, to show others that they too could rise above prejudice and claim their worth. As the gala ended and Marcus stepped outside, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Change started small, with courage and determination. And if he could inspire just one person to stand up against injustice, then everything he'd done was worth it. The screen faded to black, and text appeared. "Change starts with courage. Be the hero someone needs today." Audiences erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Some wiped away tears, while others nodded in agreement, inspired to take action against the injustices they saw in their own lives. Marcus's story wasn't just a tale of triumph, it was a call to arms, urging everyone to fight for a better, fairer world. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Be the change. Like this video to show your support for powerful storytelling that challenges injustice. Share it with friends and family to spark important conversations about racism and resilience. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking narratives that inspire action and empower voices. Together, we can create a world where everyone is seen, heard, and valued.